And Ted O'Brien is the Shadow Treasurer and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, and I'm pleased to say he joins me on the line now. Ted, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Lucy.
I've got a personal question to ask you first. Please tell me, as a Liberal faithful, which I have been for many years, and so many of our loyal listeners are, can you give me some good news, Ted? Are we going to get our act together, mate?
Well, I can tell you what, the Liberal Party absolutely will, if that's the question. And you know where it starts, Lucy? It starts on topics like this: good old-fashioned economic management. To think that Australian households right across the country, they're watching what they spend, they're reining it in, but we've got an Albanese Labor government which cannot help spending on a massive spending spree. And this is where it starts, holding them to account and pointing out what really should be the obvious, and that is the Albanese government is living beyond its means, and it is the average taxpayer who'll pay it. It'll be the children of Australia. It'll be their children, because we're going to have debt hitting $1 trillion this year. The Labor Party is planning a decade of deficits moving forward. And this is, as Treasury has now pointed out, in black and white, because they cannot stop spending money, Lucy.
And it's quite terrifying because the average person, and I mean, for you and I, Ted, you've made a career in politics, right? That is your job. You've been elected to represent and serve the people of this nation. But the everyday Australian, what we're realising is, the moral people I talk to on the street, they're not that invested in politics, right, and policy, and really paying attention to who it is they're voting for and what they're voting for. The greatest concern that I have is, in the face of all of these missteps that we're seeing from Labor, is that they were still able to be re-elected at the most recent election. Now, in your estimations, I know you're in the midst of this review and there's so much work and listening that the Liberal Party have committed to doing in this next phase, right, as we enter this next chapter.
Yes.
But the way that you look at it now, on reflection, do you feel that Labor won because they deserved to, or that the Liberals lost because they didn't deserve to win?
I think far more the Australian people did not see in the Liberal Party what they expected or what they wanted. I don't look back, Lucy, at the last election and think it was a resounding success for the Labor Party. I know that Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers just continue to do a victory lap. That's all they've been doing ever since.
Well, they won the election based on lies, effectively.
Well, yeah, you're spot on. You're spot on. And how much did we talk about this the last term of government, pointing out their lie of promising a $275 reduction in household power bills? But people are paying up to $1,300 more. And now, as you pointed out, this Treasury report, we all heard Jim Chalmers before the election saying the budget is in good nick. But now Treasury has said, well, actually, it's not sustainable. They're going to build, 1.2 million houses? No, they're not. Treasury has confirmed in black and white they're not. I mean, the Property Council say they're about 460,000 new homes short. And so they make promises they can't deliver. They spend money they don't have, and they hide the truth of these things because they have no solutions. And from our point of view, from the Liberal Party's point of view, Lucy, we've got to call it out. We've got to hold them to account and not be shy in doing so.
And are we any closer to doing that, to standing in our convictions and rediscovering what it is that people really loved about the Liberal Party? All the loyalists who continue to vote and to show this party the support that it deserved at the time, unfortunately, have defected, Ted. They've started to, have a greater appetite for the likes of One Nation, for example, independence, Teals. Can we get back there?
Lucy, 100%. And it does start with this stuff. It starts with restoring the discipline of fiscal responsibility, that you can't spend money beyond your means. I mean, if you look at what's happened just the last 2 years alone of the Albanese government, they have increased Commonwealth government spending by 17%. When they inherited government spending to GDP was 24% this year, it'll be 27%. And so I think it starts with fiscal discipline. And that is something the Labor Party will not talk about. So even since the election, you've heard Jim Chalmers out there talking about wanting to have a round table, and tax is going to be really important to him and the Labor Party. But what he hasn't talked about is what he's going to do with reining in his spending spree. But we heard from Treasury today in black and white saying, well, they've got a problem. They're just spending too much. And even last week, Lucy, we heard about the RBA's decision on the cash rate. There was lots of discussion, including from the Treasurer, about, the need to have monetary policy discipline. But there is zero fiscal policy discipline, and fiscal policy is the responsibility of the Commonwealth Government. And so, yes, you will continue to hear a lot more about this in this term of government from the Liberal Party, from the Coalition, because fiscal responsibility is core in our genes, but it is something where the Labor Party is loose and they've completely lost control.
I agree with everything that you're saying, but how will the Liberal Party plan to fix this, Ted? And as I said, I know that you're deep in the throes of this review and this listening tour and trying to reflect on what went wrong in order to get it right going forward. But can you give us some insight? Are you working on any policies, things that are really going to resonate with the Australian people that you will be able to prosecute more effectively this time around? Because I had you back, mate. I'll tell you now, I love the idea of nuclear. There are so many sensible things that the Liberal Party were proposing that just fell flat. And was it because there's not an appetite for it or because you failed to prosecute those points? What do you feel is the overwhelming response?
Lucy, we're getting a lot of feedback on these things at the moment, and I have the last few weeks. And I think it's a mix of things. More than anything, people liked some of our policies. I mean, of course, I had the energy portfolio the last term of government, so I went hard on that broken promise of a $275 reduction in household power bills. I went hard on nuclear energy. But even in that portfolio, we could have done better. But I think as we move forward, one, we've got to not be shy in calling out a bad government and the impact it is having on everyday Australian households. I mean, we are in a household recession, and we have been for years. We have dropped enormously in the global rankings for our standard of living as a country. And unless we change direction, Australia is only going to land up as a poorer, weaker, more dependent nation. And I truly believe it will be a coalition, in particular a Liberal Party, that rebuilds based on our values, so our belief in freedom, equality, fair go, our belief that it is with hard work that you are rewarded. With rights come commensurate responsibilities. If we can make sure that we build our policies with a clear line of sight to these values, because this is what the Liberal Party represents, and that includes a belief in fiscal responsibility on one hand, so debt and deficits matter, and on the other hand, the need to grow the pie, grow a larger, have a far more ambitious Australian economy. That's what the Liberal Party represents, and that's what we'll be rebuilding.
So, Ted, a lot of people will say, listening to this, that all sounds great, but how is it reflected in policy?
It will be reflected in policy. And of course, Lucy, I mean, we're reviewing policy now, and it's way too early in the term for us to be releasing policy, but we are already doing the hard work. And this is key because, as we've seen from what Labor has done, it's one thing to say nice words, but it's another thing to deliver. And a big message about the Albanese government is you have to look at what they do and not at what they say. So then applying that to the coalition or the Liberal Party, it means policy is absolutely key. Policy is the way we express those values I spoke about, and it's policies that we're doing the heavy lifting on at the moment.
How do you feel about accusations that the Liberals are Labor light and that you've moved away from conservative values and staying beholden to those principles and those policies upon which this party was founded, extending all the way back to the wonderful Sir Robert Menzies?
Oh, look, I think you've got to be humble enough in politics, especially when you have been whopped, completely knocked out at an election. You've got to be humble enough to listen to feedback. And our job really is to go back to where it all started, which was our core beliefs. And yes, you mentioned Robert Menzies, Lucy, but, you know, we're not talking about values or beliefs that were sort of only relevant in the era of Menzies.
No.
We're talking about aspiration, right? You're talking about young Australians today who want to have a go. They need to have a government that will provide an opportunity for them to try to pursue whatever it is they want to achieve. A belief in the individual, a belief in family, a belief in your local community, in small businesses and in entrepreneurship. If any of those things are important to you, well, the Liberal Party should be your party of choice because that's who we fight for. Now, I mean, the Labor Party, they believe everybody should be the same. They believe in a collective approach, right? That's why they're so big on the unions. Everyone has to be the same. We don't believe in that. We believe that Australians are at their best when they can unleash their talents, when they have the opportunity to spend a buck, to invest in themselves, put their head on the chopping block. And that's what we do when we're at our best. That's the sort of Australia we need. As we move forward, we have to have a competitive Australia. And the only way we're competitive is if we unleash the talents of individual Australians, and that includes the private sector. And so this all comes back again to the economic debate, because without a strong economy, there's nothing you can do. Without a strong economy, you can't have the roads, you can't have the rail. Without a strong economy, you can't have the hospitals, you can't have the nurses, you can't have the doctors. And there's only one side of politics which has proven over the years to manage a strong economy, and that's the coalition. That's where we need to get back to.
Can we get back to that under the leadership of Susan Lee? I mean, that's and then yes, again, that's been the concern, because I'll tell you, Ted, even from a personal perspective, and I can say this, I'm a woman. This concept now that the Liberal Party has this so-called woman problem, and that the way to fix it is through quotas and all of this, what I will say is just nonsense, seems to be avoiding the real points, which is that all we care about is good policy. Can we get over this at all? This discussion around women and quotas?
You know, and I work with Susan Lee every day. I can tell you she is absolutely focused on rebuilding the Liberal Party around those values, a values-led, future-focused approach, putting the economy at the centre, and policy is absolutely the most important thing. I mean, of course, we also genuinely do want to have more women in the Parliament representing the Liberal Party and representing their community.
Do the party have a problem, Ted, do you think, with women?
No, I don't think we have a problem with women, but we do need to get more women in the party. There's no doubt about that. But one of the things, Lucy, I have to say that has given me an enormous amount of optimism, enormous amount of hope, is over the last few weeks I have met so many Liberal candidates, many of them women, who weren't elected at this last election, who should be in the Parliament representing their local communities. I mean, I don't know if the numbers like 26, 27, 28, really fantastic, high calibre female Liberal candidates who went to the last election who didn't win their seats. And this is the thing, right? We need to do better as a party. It wasn't their fault, but we need to do better as a party. So we are representing Australia. And I think Susan Lee, by the way, absolutely has what it takes to provide that leadership.
Well, we certainly hope so. Just quickly, one last question. Nuclear.
Sure.
It's on everybody's lips. I'm a massive pro-nuclear fan. I think it is the only way going forward for our economy, for our industries, to keep the lights on. But there seems to be a lot of doubt around now whether or not the Liberals, whether your party will have the conviction to admit, you know what, net zero and the Paris agreements, these are all ideological fantasies that are sending us into a hole financially and as an economy here in this country. Are those things on the chopping block? And will you have the courage to be able to abandon them?
Well, I have to say, as much as we've talked about a lot of our flaws, Lucy, from the last term of government, nobody accused us of lacking conviction and courage when it came to the energy debate. And that does include putting forward a very big plan of having nuclear as part of a balanced energy mix. My personal views on... Is it going to be the
same plan, Ted, as what Peter Dutton took to the election, or modified, revised?
Look, that's all under review as we speak, as it should be, right? And there's nothing wrong with reviewing the policy, but my view on the importance of nuclear energy has not changed one iota. As you see around the country today, some of our largest manufacturers are only continuing because state or federal governments are providing subsidies. When you say, well, why do they need subsidies in the first place? To a large extent, it's because the energy costs are too high. Mm-hmm. So basically, we are seeing a deindustrialisation of Australia. And this is why, as an economy, as a country, we are becoming poorer and weaker as the years go on. And we may have started this conversation talking about taxation and overspending by government, But also what we are seeing is the lack of action when it comes to things like energy and the bystander approach of allowing Australian companies to close their doors. 33,000 insolvencies under this government. Industries collapsing. We're losing our manufacturing capability. Why? Because this government is not adopting an energy plan, which other countries have discovered, that you can actually decarbonise while getting prices down. But the Labor government will refuse to countenance that, which is why we continue, not just as households, but as businesses, becoming poorer and weaker. So there's a lot to do, Lucy, but please rest assured that the Liberal Party and the Coalition, moreover, is absolutely focused on these issues. We're doing the heavy lifting now, and we're going to hold this government to account.
Well, it's certainly what we need. We need this government to be held to account, and I know that a lot of our listeners, Ted, and I appreciate that you've fielded some of the tough questions I've thrown at you today. They are, I feel, representative of what a lot of people are feeling and what we're certainly seeing as our feedback here at 2GB. But we can all appreciate that we need a strong democracy, and in order for that to succeed, we need a strong Liberal Party so that we can have some debate, so that when Parliament resumes next week on the 22nd, we don't see 94 seats, right, dedicated to one party, that we see more of a balance. But with due respect, you've got to get your act together, and I wish you luck with that.
Thanks very much, Lucy. Appreciate it.